Hi, and welcome to Conversations to Connect. I'm Fenella Hawksley, and on this podcast, we will be hosting conversations to share insights, research, and knowledge to inspire change and to help people feel more connected. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Conversations to Connect. Today I am with Kriss Munsya. Kriss is a Congolese-born visual artist currently living in Rio de Janeiro with experience in photography, graphic design, music, and video production. Born in the Democratic Republic of Congo and raised in Brussels, Belgium in the 90s, Kriss became aware of his differences early on. In his white-dominated surroundings, he became accustomed to experiences with normalised discrimination, oppression, and violence. He grew up in Brussels, Belgium in the 90s, and that era was very important for him. As a first-generation African immigrant, Munsya was consistently confronted with normalised and often violent racism from a young age. These experiences fed his vision of the world and himself within it. Art has been present in his life from an early age, but he decided to focus on photography 5 years ago because of his increasing involvement in social movements. He perceives photography to be an impactful medium that translates his experiences into open invitations to question the status quo. Hi, Kriss. Thank you so much for joining Conversations to Connect. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So how are you finding living in Rio?
I've been here like 2 months, and it's definitely something different from Canada. I think I still need to go back home and unpack. Right now, I'm still in it, so it's difficult to know like exactly like how I feel. I feel good. It's definitely like a bigger culture shock than I expected. Yeah, I think I need some time to just like unpack everything that's happening here.
So I know that before becoming an artist, you were working and training as a lawyer. When did you realize that art was the path that you wanted to follow and that you needed to follow?
Actually, I started as an artist.
Okay.
So I started really early on. When I was a kid, I was drawing everywhere. Every surface that I could draw, I would draw stuff. I would transform the puppets that I had into like actors of like my own like stories. I will transform the clothes into something that I will like wear because I was like impersonating like Indiana Jones or anything, you know. So art was always something that I felt like that was in me. And everyone around me was like so sure about it. Like my mom knew I was an artist, my dad, my sisters. Everyone knew that I think at like 8 years old I could like draw the anime at the perfection. You know, like so I always knew I was an artist. And so there was no question about it. But it's only when I became a teenager that like it became a problem for my parents because they're like, oh, this kid is like serious. He's gonna go for art, and they're like, no, 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 no. I was like, no, bitch, no, you not like you're going to like do something normal, like you want to do, have a job and stuff. And I was like, no, so I had to fight my parents to go for what I wanted. And so what I did, I convinced my parents to go after high school to go to fashion school. There was like a famous fashion school in Brussels. They have an entry exam. It's like 1 week, you know. So and they have like people from all over the world going there. And so I did the exam, and I had the feeling that I did well, but I wasn't accepted.
Okay.
And so when I saw the news, I contacted the teacher, the main teacher, and just like asking like why I wasn't paid because I had the feeling that it was going well and all the other teachers received my work pretty well. And in a really like long and cold and rational email, he explained to me why I was like wasting my time in arts and like I should probably focus on something else because that was not for me. And so like I don't really remember his wording, but it was kind of like really condescending. But I was 18 and he was like a respected figure in the fashion world in Belgium. And so like what the fuck do I know? And so if he says that like I'm not good enough and I will never be good enough, I should So I was wrong the whole time. And how can I be wrong for so long? It means that like I don't have a proper vision of like my own life. And so maybe I should start over. And so I was like, you know what? I might do the opposite of art. And to me, the opposite of art
Was
was
law.
law. And so I went to law school, you know. So and that's the thing that is really sad, because it took me 6 years to undo what that person did in like seconds, you know.
Like a creative U-turn. That's
Yeah.
what they're called in this book called The Artist's Way.
And the thing is, like, just like a year after I get into university, I was involved in the university government, right? Studying government. They were dividing the roles, and I was like, oh, I want to do the posters. And so a year after, I started to like learn graphic design by myself and start to do like the posters. And the year after, when I was in charge of it, there was like no day passed without people coming to me and being like, oh, I'm in love with your posters. Your posters are the best in Brussels. Like, there is no student party when like it's so cool and so vibrant. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then over the years, I was graphic designing for free for my university. There was like people from other universities coming to our university to steal the posters to put in their like apartment and flat.
I've got a question. Have you ever sent that fashion teacher some of your work now?
No, because like, you know, like there is
You
no,
may
like,
have taken 6 years of my creative life, but I'm an artist.
I truly think that he did it. It was not like about me. It was about him. It was about him showing his
Power.
authority and power.
So
I was just a person, you know.
There's this pub called Wetherspoons. They have so many pubs in the UK. They're called Wetherspoons. The guy who set them up, there was a teacher at his school that was called Mr. Wetherspoons. Yeah. And he said to the guy who set up the pubs, you will never go anywhere in life. And so when he started setting up these pubs that are now, I mean, it's the most successful, like in the UK, you've got them in every town in the UK. He decided to call them Wetherspoons after the teacher who told him that he would never amount to anything.
Yeah, it's so that's the thing. Like, I could have been another student and he would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it was not about me. And so I don't want to do my stuff about him, because like, you know, so, and also like revenge is never a plan that works the way you want, you know. So
luckily it only took 6 years of your creative journey, and your art today, it approaches topics such as identity, belonging, racism, colonialism, but also love and hope. So how did your own journey impact your desire to bring these issues to light through your work and to explore and discuss these different topics?
I feel like there is different type of artists. And to me, for some reason, I don't know why, I made the difference between Martin Scorsese and Frank Ocean.
Okay.
It could be Martin Scorsese, it could also be Greta Gerwig. I think she's in the same vibe. You know, like, you have artists, you see them everywhere. They have like 3 movies a year. They will do like advertising. They will do like all the projects. They will like do like so many things. And you know, like they produce a lot. They produce a lot because I feel like they have a way of them to remove themselves emotionally from the work. Because you can watch 100 movies from Martin Scorsese and you don't know who Martin Scorsese is as a person, because he puts a distance between what he's doing and who he is, or he limits the possibility of the audience to know who he is. So he doesn't put that much of himself in those movies. He puts effort, he puts like thinking, he puts like thoughts, and puts like emotional baggage, emotional stuff. You don't have that much, and that's how it can produce so much. And then you have like people like Frank Ocean. It's like one album and then it's gone for like years, because that was a lot of like
Adele.
Yeah, I'm more in the Frank Ocean spectrum, where like I put so much. So before making art, I have to figure my shit. And so like I have to like analyze my life, like what happened to me. And so art is the extension of my own experiences. So before making art, I have to analyze and synthesize like what happened in my life. And so it's only after I started to do therapy and to have an approach like a macro and micro and macro view on my own life that I started to, I think, in my opinion, to make good art. And so, yeah, so like when I started to do that, put my own experience into the a big picture, like the experience like Black people have, people from the diaspora have, it's only then that like I could have articulate my art, I think, better. That's how I was always making art, but when I started to make sense of my own life, that when I think my art became way better in my own vision, I think.
So you've lived in many different countries, Congo, Belgium, Canada, and now Brazil. How has moving and living in these different countries affected your view of the world and your sense of belonging? And has that impacted your art?
To me, every culture, it's like a person. And when you go to another country, another like culture, another community, it feels like you're going to someone's house, and they have like different way of like doing things, you know.
Interesting.
And so you always take someone from, it's like doing like a year abroad in a family that like hosts you, and like they have this like weird habits of like, I don't know, like praying before eating. And then like when you come back home, you enjoy to do that, and so you start doing it, and so you bring something, and that just makes your approach to things a bit thicker or more complex, or so you have different views of like what's happening in your life. And I feel like going from Belgium to Canada gave me like a sense, I understood and I get more empathy for indigenous communities, because I'm like, oh, they had a different experience. I thought the Black experience of the diaspora was the only thing I could have empathy for. And I got there and I was like, no, there is also that experience that I can like also take for myself. And that's how I integrated the vision of the indigenous experience in my own life, in my own vision. And so I think it gives you more empathy, I guess. Yeah, I have like way more empathy for indigenous communities. And now like in my work, I bring that like lens. I try to have this lens of indigenous communities in my own work. I used to do my work and do like, oh, I want to express stuff for Black people. But now I'm like, oh, I want to express stuff for oppressed people all over the world, whoever they are. And so I think like going to different places gives me more empathy for more people.
Because I suppose in a way you become part of that community. So you do understand their experience.
I mean, I'm not part of the indigenous community in Canada. I'm way more exposed to indigenous experiences because it's that conversation is like way more highlighted in Canada. So it's not a big conversation in the US, for example, or Europe. In Canada, indigeneity is a topic that you can hear about more often. And coming from a colonized country and being oppressed myself just gives me a bit more tools to feel closer to the indigenous experience.
Was that the inspiration for your later work, Killing Da Vinci?
Yeah.
Moving to Canada?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about that, the idea of your latest photographic project, which explores environmental justice and environmental racism with Indigenous communities around the world, entitled Killing Da Vinci. I wanted to ask you when that first came to you and if you could explain a bit about your project.
So when I was in Belgium, I had this, for a lot of people, this vision of Canada being like, it's a bunch of people on horses eating maple syrup all day and and saying goodbye and thank you to everyone, you know. And I moved there. I think 2 days later, there was a strike on the street about an indigenous community who was fighting for their water. And I was like, oh, this place is not what I thought it is. So I started to be interested more about like what was happening. And so I feel like everyone knows about it. Everyone knows what happened in the continent of America. A bunch of white people went there, killed everyone, and then like start living and try to forget about it. I knew it from school, but I was like, yeah, it's probably over right now. And then like, no, it's not over. When you start something, it's never over until you actually acknowledge and repair it. It's like when you have like, you're dating someone and you have a huge fight, and then you go to sleep and you hope that when you wake up, that fight is over. It's never over. It's
and 5 years later, if you still haven't spoken about it, it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there, you know. So That's the image I had of Canada when I moved there. I just realized in what it wasn't that way. But it took me some time to actually care, because caring is not something that's easy. You have to actually make an effort and see people and talk and make mistakes. Sometimes, like, I would say something and people would say, "Oh yeah, but that's like offensive to Indigenous people," and I was like, "Oh, why?" Like, and you start to make the work. It's being white and trying to go to black spaces. You will say some shit that's not going to be appreciated, but if you're willing to change, if you are like humble enough to change your approach to things, it will make you better. And so having that in me, I had this vision. Sometimes when I walk in the streets or when I travel, I have ideas for like projects, and I just like write them in a book. And then I had this idea, like this visual idea about like a photo. And then a few months later, I saw a document, like friends were shooting a documentary about environmental justice in a studio I was renting. And then that's when I made the connection. I was like, oh, I can mix my idea, like my visual idea, with environmental justice. And then the only thing that was missing was the angle. That when you do a documentary about a topic, you have to choose an angle. And that's when I chose the angle of Da Vinci, because I felt like he was combining a lot of like things that I want to talk about. And that like one drawing he did, the Vitruvian Man, was combining everything I want to talk about. The first thing is the concept of perfection, because when he made that drawing, he wanted to represent the human perfect proportions. And this idea of perfection, when you think about it, it's something really weird. Like, why do you want to have perfection? Like, it's something pretty specific, and to me, that idea of perfection is what is like disconnecting societies from where they are and people from themselves. It's the idea like it's never enough. Okay. And as a person, and also as a woman, I think you can see it, like my thighs are too big, or my forehead is like where, or my makeup is not good enough, or my lips are like, and then like, and it's pretty common knowledge that like when people start to do plastic surgery, it's like a vicious cycle, because like they're like, oh, I'm not good enough, and you do it and you'll never be enough. And so it's disconnecting who you are inside from the person that you think you should be. And so, and it's not possible to reconcile the two when you have this idea that perfection is possible. And as a society, it's the same. And there is a big disconnection of like what we could be and what we have. They produce a computer today, this laptop. The next year, they're going to do one that's like slightly better. And the year after, more. And the year after, more. But we are disconnected from the fact that we don't have the resources to keep going forever. It's like people are at a party and they drunk or they like drugged and they want to continue forever. It's not possible, because like they live in that like fantasy at the time, and they disconnected from like the actual reality. And the reality is like, we cannot sustain. There were moments where they have to stop that. And I feel like that's the biggest disconnection ever. Like we produce, like we have infinite quantity of resources, but we don't.
So was that the link with perfection and environmental justice?
Yeah.
That in this chase for perfection and continually producing,
yeah,
we're so disconnected from the fact that we have limited resources on our planet, and in this quest for perfection, we're basically destroying everything that we do have.
Yeah, and the people who destroy it first are indigenous community and black, like I would say marginalized communities like over the world, but specifically in Americas is mostly black and indigenous communities.
Why are they the first communities to suffer?
Because it's like this same narrative everywhere. When like a company wants to build a plant or a factory and dump toxic waste, they're not going to do it in Hollywood. They're going to do it in places where people cannot fight. And those places are mostly populated with black or indigenous communities, And so that's why like environmental justice in the Americas is more the good term would be environmental racism, because like systematically the people are most affected are Black indigenous communities.
And you said people who can't fight. Do you feel like using the medium of photography, you are raising awareness of these issues and in a way fighting for them?
I mean, like, I'm trying to raise awareness. If I was a good public speaker, I would speak in public. If I was a good politician or like someone with like a voting base, I would use that. If I was a good economist, I would do like I don't know, like do it like through my lens, you know. But I'm an artist, so I'm trying to do it through what I do best. It's always a group effort. My art by itself would not going to change a lot, but like if everyone combined their like skills, I feel that's how we get to a result.
So just to discuss the project in a bit more detail, you chose different countries and different environmental justice issues affecting certain indigenous communities, and then you spent 20 days with each community interviewing people, and at the end you produced a photograph of one specific person from that community.
Yeah, one or several.
Okay.
And I trying to portray them to have the same position that drawing of Da Vinci had, to show the irony of Da Vinci was focusing on perfection 400 years or 500 years later. Actually, that idea of perfection, that's what's killing these people. And so to show that irony, and that's why I'm calling this project Killing Da Vinci, because I want to kill that idea that perfection not only is killing us, but for him, perfection was a white man. And I'm like, no, I'm going to portray Black indigenous communities in that photo to show that one, there is no perfection. Perfection is a concept that's killing us. And second, we all, if everyone is perfect. And I want to show, to center other type of people, you know, in the photo.
So which communities did you choose to focus on for the first part of the project?
So I traveled in the Americas, and I wanted to work both with indigenous communities and Black communities. And so I chose the spaces where like I could find both communities. The indigenous presence in the Americas, there is like indigenous presence everywhere. When you look at a map of indigenous communities, there is one called Native Lands, and we can actually see the communities over the world. You can see that like in the Americas, they are everywhere. There is presence everywhere. The density is different, but there is presence everywhere in the Americas. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go to places where the density of Black people are the biggest, so I can have both. So I went to Salvador, which is the blackest city of the blackest region of the blackest country outside Africa, in Brazil. And I went to Cali in Colombia, which is the second concentration of Black people in South America after Salvador. And I chose also Puerto Rico because I wanted to have a location in the Caribbean. And we went also to New Orleans and Detroit because they also have like a huge Black presence. And we also work in both places with indigenous people and Black people.
And what do these communities have in common?
I will like in June have like a dedicated website with all the resources, like the photos and the interviews that we did. And like when you watch all these like interviews, they say actually the same thing. They say like, we are fighting for so long and the government is silencing us. But sometimes they kill the activists. Like in Brazil, some activists get killed when they want to say something. They're lacking education, access to health, access to food, like healthy food and stuff. Like, so they've been denying all like the basic rights that other communities, I would say wider communities, have access to. And so, and depending on the location, it's like a little bit different. The main topic with the indigenous communities, like it's like sovereignty about over the land, you know, because they've been denying that access to land. And in the concept of indigeneity, like the proximity from people to land is so important. And I'm pretty sure that's why like the settlers have disconnected that, because they know that it's going to affect them way more. Black people that have been like moved from one continent to another to be slaved, that connection to land was taken, and so they had to create that like indigeneity in themselves. So they had to create something from nothing, you know. And so that's why I think like that's the huge sadness about the black people in Americas, indigenous people in Americas. They've been denied like their what their soul needs to be healthy. They've been denied for so long, and so that's why like those communities have a lot of problems, you know.
As well as this environmental justice that they're
On top of that, yeah.
When you say what their soul needs, are you talking about the connection to the land, connection to their own people? That's true. Why do you think photography is the best medium to bring awareness?
I'm not saying it's the best way.
Yeah.
But with like the way I do it and the timing, I feel like the timing is really is perfect because visual stimulation is what is growing a lot in our societies. Instagram, TikTok, all of these platforms. And yeah, if I was, for example, a sculptor or a painter or a singer, like that would be different because like if I was a sculptor doing like painting, for example, I had to paint something, then take a photo of my painting and post it. But like you have to do a good photo of your painting to share it, you know. But like with photography, you can just like upload your photo directly on Instagram, and it's like the way you want it to be, you know. And so I would say visual things are pretty powerful these days. So it's way more powerful today than it was, for example, 30 years ago when like photography was not really considered as an art form, you know?
And it wasn't as easy to share.
Yeah, it wasn't
around the world.
Yeah. So that's why like I feel like photography today is like it's evolving so quickly because it becomes like an art form that people are so used to, and that's why I feel like it's evolving in a way in a right way because people are becoming more curators themselves. Like everyone on Instagram, they see like are exposed to photography every day or graphic design stuff, and so their like taste for I would say visual imagery becomes higher, and so the stuff that you would post like 20 years ago or lazy graphic design that was working 20 years ago now is not working because people like they know what's good. They didn't know what's like bad. People are a bit more. They have like more curation skills than 20 years, 30 years ago.
What have you learned from the project and from meeting and connecting with these communities in different countries?
I was converted in the premise of my project, so that like Black indigenous communities are actually suffering. When you know the theory, it's really different to go in these places and have people telling you their stories and be like, oh yeah, like there was like people behind those statistics I was reading and the stories I was reading. There was like actual people, and so you know, like I was fighting for an idea, for a theory, but now I'm fighting for people because I have these connections, I have the names, I have the contacts, I have the phone numbers of these people, and so it just like gives me more motivation. It's just like so nice to actually have people who are suffering so much, but still are welcoming and nice and hopeful, you know.
How do these communities maintain connected with each other?
I mean, they don't, like, you know, like, and that's also something that I learned from this project. You would think that indigenous communities, they know other indigenous communities, but they don't. I mean, sometimes, yeah, but like, sometimes they don't. Like, and that was the part of the project is like to show, you know, like when we were, for example, in Salvador, we interviewed indigenous people, and then we went to Cali, and we did it, and we showed them the footages, and then they realize they're like, oh, they're going through the same thing. We don't know them, but they start to realize, like, I mean, a lot of them knew about it also, like the way I knew about it before doing it, but like they could put faces and like, oh yeah, like it's actually worldwide, you know.
What were the environmental injustices that they were facing in Salvador?
Salvador is like, it was mostly like land sovereignty, of course, and so silencing voices because people there are actually being killed in the Amazon. Activists are being killed like all the time. You know, lack of like access to food or health, and poisoning. They're poisoning by like factories and stuff because like when like you live on like what nature is giving you, and companies are burning these forest spaces, they denying you a right to actually make a living. And so that was the conversation. And the same thing in Colombia. And on top of that, enforcing a culture on people, Christianity and even a language, and actively trying to erase a culture. A lot of like communities, they were like saying that like they don't know the language anymore. They have to like organize together and fight just to preserve the tiny bits of culture that they still have, you know, because people forget it, you know.
And that disconnects you from
yourself
and your ancestry and your, in a way, your community, because a language is like culture of a community.
Yeah. So it's really difficult for a lot of like this communities to not be able to talk their language of their ancestors, and I feel like that's a big thing.
So this work was made in collaboration with the communities that you were photographing. What was the importance of making it a collaborative project?
Because I wanted to distance myself from the way like white people do things when they go to South America, to like marginalized places. It's difficult, and I would say to me it's probably impossible to at the same time being the settler or the colonizer, and at the same time elevating indigenous voices, because the essence of what you are is actually killing the person that you want to elevate, you know. And so it's like your Stockholm syndrome. The person oppresses you is never going to be the person who's going to liberate you. And so I wanted to like have a different approach, and I wanted to like actually that's the reason why I stayed there. I stayed in each place is 3 weeks. I wish I could stay longer, but like based on like the budget, it was difficult. But just to spend time with people, going for dinner, just like enjoying ourselves, see the kids, see the elders, have like conversations and stuff, be normal, and then like actually retribute them, paying their efforts, the emotional labor, their like time, you know. And also, if like my pieces are bought from, or like I sell stuff, I give them like a bit of it. It's not like I'm giving them charity, or I'm giving them like a percentage of it. I'm giving them like half of it, you know. So like they deserve that stuff because I'm making money over their image in their time, and so I'm giving them like a chunk of like what I have, and not like a percentage like they were like it was like they were like models,
an
or
extra.
you know, an extra.
So this project was focused around community, and you've spoken a lot about wanting to represent Black and Indigenous communities. What does community mean to you?
I still don't know actually, because I feel like I never really been part of a community. I mean, I am in by definition of being Black, or being from the diaspora, or living in a place. You are part of a community without even like wanting to. Like just like you are a number, a statistic, you know. So yeah, I'm part of some community, but like the feeling of being part of a community is something that like I don't really experience that much. But to me, I have that feeling, for example, when I'm going to queer events in Canada, or Black events in Canada, and like you go to a place and people, they just care. They just like care about you. They care about like, oh, like, you know, like you go to a club or to a concert in Belgium, and you start to not feel good, or like you like lost or something. You're gonna be lost for a long time. I remember I went to a party in Belgium, and I was spiked, and it was in the club. And at some point I couldn't like feel my legs and I couldn't like feel my body, and I was like on the ground in a corner, and I stayed there for 2 hours and no one came, or 3 hours, no one came, you know. And so when I'm in a part, and that's maybe like why like people started to like develop that concept of safe space in queer spaces, because people actually care. And that's like you don't only care about your friends that are around you, you care about like people that might not feel well. And that's the concept of community. Is when you go like in Africa, and when I'm in the Congo specifically, because I never been to another country in Africa than Congo, in a place or at a party, if a kid is breaking something or making too much noise, anyone in the location can like say to that kid, "Oh, don't do that," or "Do that," or something, because it's not like, oh, you are a family and you only have the right to talk about people in your family. Anyone there can be like a figure of knowledge, or parent figure can actually tell that kid, "Oh no, don't do it." And so that's the community sense. Like, it's not only your friends, it's not only the people who look like you, it's like the whole thing. And so that feeling, I think I had it a lot in queer spaces.
Do you think it's not there in Belgium?
I haven't experienced that in Belgium, but I left like 5 years ago. There might be places where like I could feel that in Belgium for sure, but for example, in the the black community, for example, in Belgium, it's a bit different. I never really felt connected to black people in Belgium, because the black community in Belgium is mostly composed from people from the diaspora, from Africa. And because in Africa, the black community has been divided in countries like by like lines that don't make sense. This colonial mindset has been like exported to the diaspora. So Congolese people are going to stay together. People from Rwanda are going to stay together. People from Burundi are going to stay together. And so people from Ethiopia are going to stay together. And so it's only when I moved to North America, then I discovered, oh, here I'm black. I can be like African, I can come from California or from Houston. Like, if you're like there, if you're like in a space where if you're black, you're black. You don't care about like where you come from, And that's like when I feel way more part of the black community in North America than I feel in Belgium or the Congo. Sure.
What does the future hold? Because I know that you've done one part of the project and you have two more parts of the project that you want to interview people.
So I have a part. So I did a part in the Americas. So that was the project that I wanted to fund, actually. So I started the project in Vancouver. I was talking about a black community that has been displaced because the construction of a viaduct in Vancouver, and that's actually how I get introduced to the concept of environmental racism. So it was a place called Hogan's Alley in Vancouver, a thriving black community that was like there, and like the city of Vancouver decided to build a viaduct in the middle of that community, displacing all the black community, and so they all left Vancouver. And so
where did they go?
Throughout the Canada, I guess.
What, different people went to different areas?
Yeah.
They couldn't stay together.
Yeah. Wow. And so until this day, there was no black community in Vancouver. There was no like black space
because they were displaced.
Yeah. And so I started the project with that.
Did you interview people about how they felt since they were?
Yeah. There was actually an organization called the Hogan's Alley Society that tried to remember what happened. It was during the 50s.
When was this? And do they still feel like they're missing?
Yeah, of course.
This sense of community. What did people say about the experience and how they feel now that they live kind of disconnected from each other?
I didn't interview the people who were there at the time because it was a long time ago. So there was like descendants of people there, and so they still try to honor their ancestors. Yeah, so that's how I was introduced to the concept of environmental racism. And so I was like, oh, I want to expand this project. I want to do it in the Americas, you know. And so I get the funding to do it in the Americas. And while I was doing that there, I was like, the project is incomplete if I only do it in the Americas. And so I applied to get fundings to do it actually all over the world, in Asia, in Oceania, in Middle East, and Africa, and Europe. And so I'm going to actually start the rest of the project in July. I'm going to start in French Polynesia, then I go to New Zealand, Australia, Japan, India, and I will continue the project there. And hopefully I will have like not a complete, because it's never complete, but a larger project that will like gather more visions and more experiences, you know, not only the American experience or the African experience, but like other experiences. Altogether, it will actually show the irony of capitalism and colonialism. We are seeking progress, but no progress has been made, and it's pretty much the opposite. Because
and maybe in this quest for progress, we're losing what the essence of what makes us human.
Yeah. And
what makes us happy, connected,
community, yeah. You know? And so the colonial vision is to like make progress. We're going to like build new stuff and quote evolve, but it's always through the exploitation of other people. And what Western countries don't understand is we are one. Yeah. And so if a part of humanity is suffering, we all gonna fall in that pit together, you know. The thing is like, yeah, like they don't see it because they still think somehow that they can avoid it. They can separate themselves from the people who suffer and be like, oh yeah, we are fine, and we still gonna be fine. And that's not happening.
Did you see a difference in mindset between the individualistic mindset of most Western countries and the Indigenous and Black communities that you were working with over the past year?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
What was the difference?
When I was in New Orleans, for example, in New Orleans, I would go to a jazz club and I will meet musicians, Black musicians there, and they're like doing their craft and they're enjoying themselves. And they want to try to just like make people feel happy. And they will like tell stories about like how they got there. And then you will meet with a white musician, and then they will tell you about, oh yeah, like I moved to New Orleans to learn more music to advance my career. But it's not about the culture, it's still about themselves. And so I'm not saying that every white musician in New Orleans have that vision, but that's the difference between the settler and the creator. The person is like actually have a deep connection with their craft, with their land, with their like
other people,
you know, other people, because they're not doing it for personal advancement, they're doing it for their community to enjoy. And then you have someone who say, oh yeah, like I moved in New Orleans because I want to learn more about music and learn about jazz. And then like they're going to another city, they're going to like produce their jazz record for something and not credit anyone from New Orleans. So that's the mindset.
Why do you think Western culture is so individualistic? Is it because we have lost our connection with community?
No, it's because it's based on exploitation. So if you want to exploit people, you have to dehumanize them. That's the only way like your brain can actually function. And you dehumanize them, and so they're not part of your spectrum anymore. They're not human for you. They're different. And that's how your vision gets smaller and smaller, because at first it's the slaves. They're not human. Then it's poor people. You have to exploit them to make you a living because you want to like have more and more. Then it's women. Then like last week, Texas passed a bill to like make children work again. You know?
Why is Texas going back? Haven't they passed a bill about abortion too?
Yeah, because like that's the like when you build your society on exploitation, that's when you lose everything, and like you everyone becomes a stranger. everyone becomes different from you, and you lose the sense of community, you lose the sense of empathy. And so
how can we bring that back?
you have to make a sacrifice on your own purpose, which is making profit. When you stop want to make profit out of a situation, out of people, that's when you can actually enjoy them. That's if you can sacrifice that, that's when you start to actually be a human being to other people.
So we usually end this podcast on 2 questions. The first question is, when did you last feel lonely? And the second question is, what advice would you give to someone to help them feel more connected?
Last time I felt lonely was today, I think, or yesterday. I mean, in general, it might be a bit weird, but like, I feel the most lonely when I am surrounded by the wrong people. When like I'm in a place where I don't know anyone, I feel lonely. One of my biggest fear is to drown in a crowded beach. Water is like isolating. The sound doesn't really navigate the water that much, so it's pretty silent. And there is like people around, but they don't see you. And can you see them, you feel their presence and hope they will help you, but you die alone, you know?
Wow.
And so that's like, to me, like, that's why like I don't like to live in apartment buildings, because there is, you know, like there is like people above, people underneath you, like on, you know, on the side. It's crowded with people, but if like you have like a stroke in your apartment, no one will know, and you hope that like someone will like hear you or something, but like, and you die with that like hope that someone's going to like help you. And to me, that's like really like, that's one of my biggest fears, like to be in need and to hope. And my last thought is like, oh, I hope someone's gonna come, but no one comes.
God, that feels like a metaphor for living in a city.
Yeah.
There are studies that the more people who are in a crowd when something happens, the less likely someone will help you.
Yeah.
To whatever it is that you need to do.
Yeah, and so I feel that's why, like, you know, like your grandparents were like, you're in a small city, and then you go to the big city and you come back to visit your grandparents, and they will tell them, oh, I feel lonely there, and they're like, what? There was like so many people there. How can you feel lonely? Just go in the street and you will see people. Because like that's the paradox of like.
In London is the loneliest city in the UK. It's got 9 million people. It's the highest populated city, but it's the loneliest because, yeah, there is almost an anonymity and loneliness in the fact that you are one of so many people, but people don't know each other.
Yeah.
But that's quite a horrible nightmare to have. Oh my God.
I mean, it was never been like a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's only like a feeling that I have when like I'm surrounded by people. I'm just like feel really lonely, you know. But I don't have like the actual fear of dying. But I'm just like projecting myself. I'm like, oh, if for me it would be the worst way of dying.
Or just going back to that, you said that you felt lonely today. Is that linked with like moving to a new place or moving? I mean, I've just moved to Rio too, and like there's like a loneliness that comes with moving to a new place and not really knowing that many people there.
Yeah, and also it's about the language. Like they speak that language, you don't really speak it that well. But like I feel like that's the normal way of like doing stuff when you move to a new place. You feel lonely at first. Yeah, there was this aspect of like going to a new culture, not knowing anyone. And so yeah, I would say today to yesterday. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to someone to help them feel more connected?
I give that advice to one of my friends a few years ago when she was going through depression and burnout and a breakup. The 3 of them were linked. And I told her at some point, I was like, to me, it feels like one way of feeling less lonely and less depressed is to actually help others. And so if you like can give your time to go to like a nonprofit or a place where like you can actually like you can just like help for helping, no like retribution involved. And I feel like that when you do that, I feel like it gives you like more perspective on things. You know, like of course you can end up in like a nonprofit or like an organization that's like poorly manage, and like maybe like it's managed like a company, and it's like also like, and it doesn't feel that you're helping. But there is like ways to find like, I feel like when you feel lonely and like, oh, I'm going to like, you know what, I'm going to try to help others, I'm going to try to like connect with others, like just by helping it make you feel less lonely.
You know what's really interesting? So in Western culture, when we're not feeling good, we say, oh, like, get yourself a candle, do some self-care for you. But in Eastern cultures, they say help others. So it's true,
yeah.
like giving to other people not only connects you with other people, but it also gets you out of your own head and your own misery or own experience,
Yeah.
and realizes that other people also need your help. And it introduces you to more people, and feeling lost and disconnected, it connects you with a cause, it connects you with people, and it gives you a sense of purpose, which also leads to feeling disconnected and isolated, not having a purpose, not having a mission.
Yeah.
Like you said, going somewhere else with your work and with what you're doing, it's connected you to other people. It's allowed you to empathize with more people. And in a way, it also gets you out of your own experience and realizes that there is so much suffering in the world, but there's also so much that we can do as individuals to either shed light to it or help. And once you start doing that, you feel more connected. So I think more people need to follow the Eastern thought process, which is, if you're feeling really bad, the best way to connect with others is to help other people.
I didn't know it was like an Eastern thing, but to me it makes sense. And when I was in Vancouver and I started to feel depressed during the COVID, that's what I did actually. I'm still doing it, going to like nonprofit and food distribution, and just for example, what I'm doing in Vancouver is like I'm doing a food bank. I'm like helping for a food bank, and then we receive all this food from donations, and then you have to give them back to people in the street. And then like you realize how like sometimes you just like throw food that's good because you receive like stuff like an apple a little bit damaged. The supermarket, they don't sell it because it looks damaged, but you can still eat it, and so it gives you like more perspective, and you realize stuff about yourself, and then like it gives you another motivation, like, oh yeah, I need to be like more intentional with my food, just like help you developing new vision. If you're a human, you are a worker, you're an actor, you're a lawyer, like, and then like you realize at some point that I want better conditions for my work and the government's not helping. And I'm like, how are you expecting people to help you if you're not helping yourself, other people? And so that's the thing, like as a someone in member of a society, as a citizen, it's normal to help others, to take some time of your week, of your day, to just help other people just for no particular reason, because that's what you expecting from the government, from your region, from your mayor, or from you expect them to take care of you, but sometimes it's just because you pay stuff. But no, like if you want people to care about you, you have to care about people.
It's funny, when I was feeling really lonely in Brazil, like just the other week, and then I went and taught an English class with the guys that do capoeira. How I felt before I went and taught the class and how I felt after was so different. Like I can't explain it. It's kind of like, not only are you helping others, but you're also helping yourself feel connected to other people.
I might also question the question itself.
Yeah.
Frame it. When's the last time you felt lonely? Feeling lonely is like an individual experience,
Yeah.
When you feel lonely, you have to remind yourself that a lot of people feel lonely.
Yeah.
And so you're like, how can I help other people to not feel lonely? How can I, as a member of this like huge community, which is London, for example, how can my experience help other people? Because if you feel lonely, the solution to not feel lonely is always another person, So the solution is other people. You not find the solution of being lonely being within yourself, because that's the problem. You're by yourself, And so the question would be like, how can like my feeling, my presence help another person, and how is that other person also like, how can we join our energies to make that feeling disappear in each of us, you know? And so, because yeah, like to me, phrasing it that way, is it, oh, like when the last time you felt lonely, you're like, you feel lonely, but like no, like the solution is always another person. And so, like, how do you make that happen, you know?
Thank you so much for our conversation today. It's been so interesting and insightful, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the next phase of your project. Thank you.
Welcome.